Reviews for various publications, Forum and International Studio among them, allowed me to move from my dismal flat in the Bronx to a two-room apartment over a store on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan. Disagreeably dilapidated though the building might be, the $35 a month rent was friendly enough. In addition, after a debilitating illness, my health had recently improved. For months I had been weak and on edge, filled with hallucinations and phobias, and would surely have checked myself into a hospital if my monetary status had allowed. Instead, I ministered to myself in a singularly unromantic garret, a boarding house room in the Bronx, until I looked healthier and less drawn, and could come out among the civilized once again. Perhaps a certain illness-induced gauntness emphasized my already Mephistophelian features. The receding nature of a reddish-brown hairline emphasized my intellectual stance, even if the former aspect was underscored by the devilish glint in my blue eyes and the spade-shaped, if well-trimmed, full beard, the upturned corners of my mustache perhaps hinting at my pro-German leanings. Well over a decade later, my Germanophile's view might seem harmless enough. On the eve of what would be the Great War, I suffered numerous negative repercussions, due to what I admit was an intellectual's naivete. It seemed to me that reasonable men could tell the difference between Wagner and Kaiser Bill, that a mind fond of Mahler, Strauss, Goethe, and Mann did not signify an insurgent heart. This pro-German stance, added to my reputation as a prolific if outspoken columnist, with the boost of an H.L. Mencken recommendation, had brought me to this table. Of course, it could also be said that Gavrilo Princip made inevitable disappointment when, on June 28, 1914, on a Sarajevo, Serbia street, he shot and killed the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. As a bonus, Princip had also killed the Archduke's wife, and this rash act, the Archduke's assassination, that is, not Mrs. Archduke's, served to spark a war involving Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, and Great Britain. 10 million lives would be lost, 20 million souls would be wounded, and 25 million tons of shipping would be sunk. But the war was 3,000 miles away on this warm Friday evening in Manhattan in late April of 1915. The three of us were in a bustling Bavarian restaurant near Union Square on 14th Street. Perhaps the city's best-known German restaurant, Luchau's, with its dark woodwork and Baroque dining rooms with their elaborate gilt-framed landscape oils and solemn looming stag's heads, found its popularity unswayed by a growing anti-German sentiment and remained a favorite haunt of writers, musicians, and theater folk. Tonight, I was dining at the invitation of publishing legend Samuel Sidney McClure and one of his associates, Edward Rumley. We were seated at a table beneath the Wagner murals in the Nibelungen room. I had my back to the 8-piece orchestra, which had been brought to this country by Victor Herbert, whose mediocre music they performed with all the lack of panache it deserved. Fortunately, the din of dinner conversation all but drowned out the orchestra's brainlessly lilting oral wallpaper. We were drinking beer from Stein's, having completed our prime beef and red cabbage. McClure was a stern-looking character, with a short blunt nose and a carelessly trimmed white mustache, his blue eyes piercing in an almond-oval face topped with a shock of gray hair. A thought-gouged crease between his eyes suggested eternal skepticism. His brown-vested suit with darker brown bow tie might have been the attire of a chief clerk, not the man who invented newspaper syndication, and whose McClure's magazine had taken on corruption in corporations and city government. After all, the term muckraker had been coined to describe McClure's efforts, which included publishing Lincoln Steffen's Shame of Our Cities series and blistering exposés on Standard Oil and the United Mine Workers. The third and final member of our little all-male dinner party was a thick-set fellow in his mid-30s who looked rather like a bulldog in a three-piece suit, a navy suit as rumpled as its wearer's homely face. This was Edward Rumley, the owner and publisher of the New York Evening Mail, a recent acquisition of this scion of the Rumley Farm implement manufacturing clan. The family wealth may have derived from diesel farm equipment, but Edward Rumley had other ideas about making his own fortune in